He said it as a joke, and everyone laughed, but she felt the words land like a challenge she had been running from her entire life. Sing Mozart, and I'll marry you, the billionaire announced with a playful smile, raising his glass as the guests around him chuckled in agreement. The restaurant was filled with crystal lights and quiet luxury, the kind of place where people spoke softly but judged loudly. She stood there in a simple waitress uniform, holding a tray, her braid falling over her shoulder, her face calm but pale. Her name was Elena. Most of the guests barely noticed her unless their glass was empty. The billionaire, Adrian Keller, was known across the city. Tech genius. Investor. Philanthropist when cameras were near. Untouchable. He was hosting a private dinner for partners and artists, celebrating a new cultural foundation he had funded. A string quartet had just finished playing a piece by Mozart when he made the joke. He looked at Elena because earlier she had quietly corrected a guest who mispronounced the composer's name. It had surprised him. You seem to know your Mozart, he teased. Go on then. Sing. Impress us. Laughter circled the table again. Elena felt the familiar burn of humiliation. She had heard that tone before. Curious, amused, superior. People often assumed that a waitress could not possibly understand classical music. They did not know that she had once stood on stages much larger than this dining hall. They did not know that 5 years ago she had been a scholarship student at the conservatory, training as a soprano with a voice her professor called rare. They did not know that her father's sudden illness forced her to leave school, sell her violin, and take the first job she could find. They did not know how quickly dreams can shrink when hospital bills grow. She lowered her eyes and said softly that she was working. Adrian smirked. Afraid? He asked lightly. The word lingered. Afraid. The guests leaned in, expecting her to laugh it off. Sadness rose first, heavy and familiar. She remembered auditions she never got to finish. She remembered packing her music sheets into a box. She remembered her father apologizing for being sick. Helplessness followed close behind. This was his world, his table, his rules. She was just staff. If she embarrassed him, she could lose her job. The manager was already watching nervously from the corner. Elena inhaled slowly. There was a small, quiet hope inside her that had never fully died. She still sang at night in her tiny apartment when no one could hear. She still practiced scales under her breath while polishing glasses. Music had never left her, even if the stage had. 1 minute, she said finally, placing the tray down carefully. The room grew curious. Adrian leaned back in his chair, amused, confident that this would be entertaining at best. Elena closed her eyes for a brief second. She chose an aria she had once performed at her final conservatory recital, a piece by Mozart that begins softly, almost like a whisper. Her first note was gentle. Clear. It floated above the clinking glasses. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. The second phrase carried strength. By the third, the air itself seemed to tighten. Her voice was not loud. It was controlled, precise, filled with emotion that could not be faked. The room fell completely silent. Even the staff froze near the kitchen doors. Adrian's smile faded slowly. This was not a party trick. This was training. Discipline. Pain transformed into sound. She moved through the aria with steady breath, each note shaped with care. The high passage arrived like sunrise, effortless and bright. No one laughed now. When she finished, the silence lasted longer than the performance. It was the kind of silence that holds awe. A woman near the window wiped her eyes. One of the investors whispered, "My God." Adrian stood up without realizing he had. Something had shifted. The power in the room no longer belonged only to wealth. Elena opened her eyes. She did not bow dramatically. She simply picked up her tray again. "Your wine, sir," she said calmly. The moment could have ended there, but justice rarely arrives instantly. Adrian cleared his throat. He asked where she had trained. She answered honestly. He asked why she was working here. She told him simply that life changes plans. There was no bitterness in her tone. Only truth. In the days that followed, the video of her performance, secretly recorded by a guest, spread online. Millions watched. Comments poured in. Musicians recognized technique that cannot be improvised. Invitations began arriving. A conductor from the city opera requested an audition. Adrian watched it all unfold with a mixture of admiration and discomfort. He realized his joke had revealed not her smallness, but his own assumption. He visited the restaurant again, not with friends this time, but alone. He apologized. Not publicly for applause, but quietly, directly. He offered to fund her return to the conservatory. She listened patiently. Patience had become her quiet strength. She thanked him but said she would accept only an audition, not charity. If she returned, it would be on merit. He agreed. Weeks later, she stood on a real stage again, under bright rehearsal lights, her heart racing but steady. She sang not to prove him wrong, but to reclaim herself. The audition panel listened in the same stunned silence as the dinner guests had. She was accepted. Contracts followed. Her father, now recovering, watched her first official performance from the front row. Adrian attended too, sitting quietly in the back, not as a savior, but as a witness. After the final note of the evening soared through the opera house, the audience rose to its feet. Applause thundered, not because a billionaire had joked, but because a voice that had been silenced by circumstance had returned stronger. Later, when reporters asked about the famous dinner remark, she smiled gently and said that sometimes jokes reveal hidden truths. She never mentioned marriage. She never needed to. The real victory was not impressing a powerful man. It was rediscovering her own power. Sadness had shaped her. Helplessness had tested her. Quiet hope had sustained her through long nights of doubt. Patience had carried her back to the stage. And justice arrived not as revenge, but as recognition. The billionaire who once believed he could command the room with a sentence learned that true influence is listening when someone sings from the depths of their story. And Elena, the waitress who was once invisible between tables, became unforgettable not because she accepted a challenge, but because she answered it with truth in her voice.